Okay, I think we're here. Welcome. I'm Michale Chatham, and I'm going to be talking to these lovely ladies today who all went through the True North couples container. Was it last year? It was last year. And the reason I'm doing this talk, the reason we're having this talk today is because I cannot tell you how many through the True North woman applications, women are like, when do we get to work on my husband? When do we get to deal with my husband? When do we get to, okay, this is all great, but he's the one with the issues. When do we get to do that? And so in the True North approach, the women go first. And each of you actually spent time, except Kelly, spent time working with me before they went into the couples container. And Kelly's like, yep. And it's a really good idea that people do.
It is.
It's such a good idea. And now we have this thing where there's 8 weeks with the women, and then the guys have an opportunity to come to Maui and have this big adventure, which Molly, Sam did it, Briana, Colin did it. So you guys can talk about how that went if you want. And then we come together as couples to achieve like whatever your outcome is, whatever it is that you're trying to create or do or build a foundation for your next thing. Okay, so I wanted to frame this up, and I'm going to let everyone here introduce themselves, what they do, pitch their stuff, and then we're going to have this roundtable convo. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm Briana Skinner. I live here on Maui, do residential real estate here on Maui and also in Columbus, Ohio.
You would not have said that a year ago.
I would not have said that a year ago.
I'm just going to point this out. You would not have said that a year ago.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Found Michelle through Kori, and so thankful for that. Thank you, Kori. Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's it. What else are we saying?
Well, you're selling houses, and you guys, you started off in mentorship, and then you switched to the couples group. Yeah, because you weren't building a practice. You were creating a stable, healthier marriage to build your next thing on, which dropped in, happened, it's zooming, it's rolling, and every step of the way I was like, come back.
No, we want to try everything. Yes. So yeah, that's where we're at now. Just like continuing to build things, and that's where we're at.
Thanks. Okay, who else?
I'll go. I'm Molly. I'm a chiropractor here on Maui. Michelle and I worked together originally in a Practice Genesis container where we worked with other practitioners on Maui, mainly for like babies, lip and tongue tie world, and to create some type of holistic center on Maui for that kind of thing. And then I met my husband now, and this was at the beginning of our Practice Genesis actually. And Michelle asked me a question. Well, we had met, and then things started shifting between him and I's relationship to be more intimate and more romantic. And then Michelle asked me a really potent question. She was like, because I was so in my head about if I should be doing this. We were friends for an entire year. And then she asked me, would you lay down everything that you have? Would you trust him with everything you have? Would you be able to lay down everything in his hands? And I was like, yes, of course. And she was like, then what's the problem? And I'm like, okay. So I think in that moment right there, I was like, it's all my internal process that's preventing me from stepping into what I really want. And the moment that all cleared, like I realized I had this little list of, because we both met each other later in life. He was 34, I was 29. And I had this little list of all the things, all the husband things that I needed to have checked off, and like we do when we get older. And he met all of them except for like 2. And I don't know how I didn't see that the whole first year of our friendship. But then once she asked me that, I was like, okay, I could trust him with my entire life. I could give him everything. He could take it and run with it. And I would love that. And so we entered, so that was Practice Genesis. That was like a 6-9 month thing. And then we entered couples creation container together. And when we began, we were not engaged. So we got engaged like halfway through. And then towards the end of the container, we got married. And Michelle was actually our officiant for the ceremony, which was really beautiful. And so I just watched his transformation wholeheartedly. Like he jumped into everything. There was no question of like, I think there was a little bit of a hesitancy for him to step into the couples creation container with, or like the True North container with the like the financial piece, because he's never done an investment like that before, which was super fun for me to get to witness and watch. But there was no, it wasn't like me pulling him or dragging him or doing, I was like, I'm doing this. I think this is what we should do together. Let's try this out. And he was like, okay.
And you guys were doing couples therapy, like counseling.
Yeah. So so we also did what you're supposed to do is the marriage counseling, the Christian marriage counseling. We did that as well. And it was really
We're all laughing. You're like,
yeah, like okay, yeah. Well,
sorry. No, sorry.
No, the investment for the True North was it was higher stakes. So we knew that on some level we were going to get more out of it because we were interacting with Michelle a little bit more frequently. But I think just like the frequency or even just like the depth of the questions versus like what we experienced with the Christian counseling, it was just unparalleled. And like we didn't walk away with that kind of stuff. We kind of dreaded those meetings. Like, I don't know. She was just talking about like who wants to do the dishes more often. And like, and we were like, we don't know. We're going to switch back and forth. And like, we don't really want to talk about that. So it was a interesting process.
And what are you selling right now, Molly? What's new?
What am I selling? I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby soon. So I'm preparing for that. I'm birthing a few things. I just created an online educational like birth guide. So it goes through like holistic pieces of birth and pregnancy and that whole season, which I'm super stoked about. It's been like a little love baby of mine for a minute. And then also creating a course for chiropractors to create prenatal practice. That was birthed out of so many questions and like teaching prenatal chiropractic to other chiropractors. So that's going to drop at the end of this month as well. And then I think I'm going to hibernate and like get ready for a baby.
Love it. Okay. Who's next?
I'll go. I'm Cathy, and my husband Steve and I, we found Michelle. Well, I had heard of Michelle a while back, but I can't remember exactly how. And that's like my like cracking up thing. But we heard about the couples container kind of from Colin and Briana, because they had like hopped in and we were like, okay, are we like supposed to do this? And stars aligned, everything just like opened up for it. So we took a huge leap of faith and did the couples container, and literally it was huge for us, like life-changing, literally. So yeah, we loved it. And it was like Michelle said, I didn't have a ton of, or really any Michelle experience before doing this. So it was like, we were dove right on in. Okay. It's a big step. It's a lot, but it was so good. Yeah, life-changing. But anyways, yeah,
Kelly and I have these funny moments where we're like, you remember the time you said this and I really hated you for that? Or do you remember the time this happened and I just about died? And I'm like, yeah, it was so good, wasn't it? Really crying over there like, oh my God.
But yeah, no, it was great. Like we have 3 kids. We live in Florida currently. And yeah, I have, as far as like what I've got going on is I already have a sourdough ebook out. That's kind of where I started. I have another summer recipes ebook. My friend and I are working on the 2nd volume of the sourdough ebook. And then I have something else just kind of coming down the pipeline. It's still in the seedling phase, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's coming and I'm very excited about it, like really pumped about it. So yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Kori.
Hi guys, I am Kori. I live on Maui. We've been here since actually coming up right at 3 years. And Michelle was actually probably the very first contact that I ever made a connection with on island. We were still, the quarantine was still happening when we were here. And so we were like, you know, quarantining in this wonderful home, and got connected with Michelle. And I've talked about this on a previous video we did together on this channel, but I came in kind of searching for one thing, and then it ended up being something so much bigger than that. And I basically burned down everything I was doing as far as the like kind of just like the heart and the energy with how I showed up with what I was passionate about, like burn that whole structure down, created an entire new frame after working with Michelle, and then started an online course. And basically my field is metabolic health and kind of claiming innate vitality. And so that's kind of my heart for women, is being able to build capacity and vitality in order to make changes for themselves, their family, and kind of create this ripple effect, which is this wonderful merging in this conversation, because that was kind of my own personal journey. And I started working with Michelle, and I was kind of doing this like the focus was on my son at the time. And then it was like, oh, it actually starts with me. And at the same time, my husband, he was starting something of his own business-wise, and it wasn't really picking up the momentum that he had this vision for. And so he was doing a lot of like, do I feel like a failure? Do I feel like he was having his own process? And we kind of, for a bit, just kind of went like this a little bit. And me and my son kind of started this momentum where we were like, you know what, we can either stay stuck, or we can continue to build charge, build vitality, focus on ourselves, focus on healing. And I think that, yeah, it was about 2 full years of essentially that kind of momentum before my husband basically was like, what like couples container kind of dropped in our field after a conversation with Michelle. And he was basically like, what does it cost? I would drop anything to be able to step into this with you. So that's kind of my journey. Couples container was, yeah, a few months, and we completely, like, we're talking restored every single thing that was dead in our marriage. And essentially what was dead was just us kind of trying to fit into this box of what we thought that our marriage was supposed to look like, and what we had received through counseling and mentoring and books, and just this pursuit of what like traditional masculinity and femininity looked like, and especially within the church. And yeah, I think a lot of that it's with great intention. And yet I think what I've learned a lot from Michelle is it's this like individualized mapping that people are placing onto other people, instead of understanding that things can look a lot more nuanced than we think. And we just have to be able to actually have the capacity to even think outside the box to understand what that would look like with a holistic lens, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, for us, it was like a huge leap of faith and a huge trust into the grand design of the entire like human experience, basically, that led us to where we are now. So eternally grateful. And yeah, in my field, I've seen a lot of the similar questions of just like, even metabolic health wise, like, how do I get my husband on board? How do I get my husband on board? And just from personal experience and watching those women, the ones where shifts have happened seamlessly and with no effort, with no like masculine effort coming from the woman, is the one where she releases her control and unattaches herself from the outcome, which is everything I've learned from Michelle. So it's interesting to watch that same ripple effect happen, and something that's been really fruitful to witness.
That's awesome. Thank you all for sharing that. You know, what's interesting is, I know for you, Kori, one of the things that came up was we were at Briana's house that day, and I said something to you about, or we were talking about your next thing, and you're like, oh yeah, I want to talk to you about that. And I just looked at you just straight as day, and I said, you guys don't have a foundation for that yet. And you were like, how did you know? And I'm like, it's pretty, pretty obvious. And so I guess that's one of the things is the precision with which I was able to identify that is the precision that we use through the whole process, right? Just like at one point, I told Kelly, I told Steve, I said, I'm getting your wife ready to leave you. She's going to have a business and she's going to have money, and I'm going to get your wife ready to leave you, and he was like, what does this even mean? And so, things like that, just I find that they can be such catalysts. But almost all of you have said the same thing, especially Kori and Molly, where you said, I'm gonna go this way. I'm gonna do this thing. And it wasn't in a, what am I trying to say? It wasn't in a, you weren't doing it to get back at anybody. You were doing it for yourself. You're like, I need this. I'm going to do this. And so I find that women who are able to do that in a really clean way, to know what they need and know how to express it, are the ones who really do like really well. They really get the outcomes that they're looking for because of the cleanness with which they go into that space. And so I wanted each of you to talk about, because like I said, I'm getting these applications are like, well, when do we get to the man? When do we get to when do we get to fix him? Well, does anybody want to talk to that? I mean, like what you've learned, because I know like Briana Colin just did True North Man. I actually invited him and Sam back into that and do that again to have that experience, right? So he's just had that. But what has been your experience with that for yourself? And then what would you tell someone else? That's a question.
I'll go.
Okay.
I think that, yeah, I mean, what each of you have said is so like resonant. I think for me, I maybe had some going into the like container. My thoughts weren't like, I need to fix myself or my husband. I think Colin and I were more coming from like we know we need to get to the next place and we need to continue our foundation, like in order to do so. With that though, man, I mean, and this is something I still like have to remind myself of daily. But like, I am a leader in my house just as much as I would ever place that position on my husband, especially with my children, especially with my husband, especially with myself. And so like my influence, if I give my influence away to my husband or to whatever, then it automatically starts the blame process. It automatically starts I'm going to point fingers. I'm going to get myself in a position of almost like separation, like that, like fight or flight situation where you're like, I don't know what's happening. A lot's going on, and it's probably your fault, I'm guessing. And not that we don't blame ourselves as well, but it's just like remembering that, like, so for me, once I kind of was able to understand that, one, I needed work, but then two, my voice, my influence was huge, and especially like over my kids. And if I'm speaking or thinking or whatever in a certain way, then that's the way my kids and my family is being shaped. If I am speaking and living in another way, which we can change, which is amazing, then that is the way my family is going to continue to be shaped and changed. And so my situation would be similar to Kori, where yes, I, have struggled with this with my husband, with myself, but more so even with my kids of like, what's wrong with you? You need to change. Like, what's happening here? So anyways, so going back, like, I think Michelle, through the container, like reclaiming and understanding like my position in our family and the power that I have as mom and as a wife is huge. It's amazing. And understanding that and being in that position, understanding who we are, like, you going through all the blueprints and stuff, like, it's just so empowering. And it's so, it's completely life altering. Like it takes you from whatever path that you are currently on and completely just redirects you to what Michelle would call like your true north, right? Like we could have been going and doing the right things on paper, but understanding that like we're here for a reason, and we're here to fulfill what we are here to fulfill, not what someone else is. And so anyways, yeah, all that to say, as far as like being in the container and starting to do that work myself and being like, okay, you know what? My husband could change, he could not change. What am I going to do? What responsibility do I have? Because if I put that on my husband, or if I put that on my kids, what's that going to do other than give them double responsibility that they're not meant for? And then what are they going to do with that? Right. So anyways, as I continue, and that again, it's like a daily thing, even almost like a choice of like, as I continue to say, wow, I here are the ways that I can show up. Here are the things that I can be responsible for and change and move toward. The ripple effects are incredible.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
that's what I saw with you was my neighbor I witnessed you guys go from your magnetic leadings to really dialing in what was really true for you. And then it wasn't what you did, it's how you did it. So you changed the blame for what you were doing and changed the how you were doing it, and everything changed. And then the other thing I saw with you was you learned to speak truth and love and power and blessing over everything. You have beautiful chickens, your kids were changing. I mean, your butt changed. I mean, it was like legitimately everything in her field was like becoming more and more vital because she learned the power of her divinity, which was to speak creation over her creation or her domain. And then I watched just vitality and power just infuse everything. So those were the things I saw. I witnessed you go through. Yeah, and it was amazing.
Yeah, Briana of speak it out and it happens. I always tell her, I'm like, she's like the person that's like, I would like a new butt tomorrow, and out and goes to bed and her butt's
It's
different.
a new butt overnight. Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at her chickens like, what are you feeding your chickens? She's like, I just speak sweet nothings over them all the time. I'm like,
it's like your magic power. It's great.
It's true. It's like you're doing it no matter what. Like you're thinking and you're speaking no matter what. You might as well like shift that into what you want.
Yeah, make it count.
I really do feel like you brought up a great point though of just the responsibility, because I feel like that's where like relationships, well, culturally for me in the Midwest, that's definitely where relationships would take off, is when the women are like outsourcing or blaming, or you could call it whatever, like putting all their decisions, giving it to somebody else for the responsibility, and then talking about how their life sucks and their marriage sucks and they wish they were appreciated and they whatever, instead of just being like, no, I'm going to choose that. How do I access that? Where does it start within me? And then watching like that ripple or the change there. And like Michelle always talks about too, having an experience with something versus talking about something, you know, like all of these concepts, I think, especially in the True North and the couples container part of it, you physically have to have an experience, emotionally, physically, energetically, you're having an experience with this, like all your shit's coming up and you're having to like have a physical experience with it. It's a totally different, and that might be even like what the difference would be between like a traditional counseling kind of model and what Michelle's doing is like it's experiential and it's immersive. It's like you're being faced all the time with the whatever out of alignment pieces are there, you know, you're having to face it and actually either walk through it or continue to stay in it, and she's going to call you out when you continue to stay in it. So
well, yeah, that's a really good point. And so what's interesting about that is, you know, like, I mean, I was married for 28 years and I've been divorced for 7, right? So these are the things that I learned along the way. It didn't come just because I studied in a book. I lived these things where I wanted to fix the other, and yet where was I in my power to be able to, to love and accept and nurture and create more of me? That was the ultimate question, right? And so not all of us are going to be able to do it in our current marriages. Now, that doesn't mean you burn it down and you get a new partner. Sometimes we burn it down within the same relationship. Some people are able to do that. Kelly's like, yep. And Kelly, you've burned it down, and that burning down where the phoenix can rise and something new can be created, that is truly, I can't think of another word. It's truly magical because it requires equal ownership of both people to be able to want that, to be able to create that and create from that space. So I don't know. And our whole talk here is really about wanting to fix the other, and then take a moment and look at, as Kyle says, the three fingers pointing back, and say, okay, well, the bulk of it's pointing back at me. This is where the onus lies. This is where the true power is to change, work with, love and accept, nurture, and create from this space. So totally.
Another question too,
Yeah.
you often ask is like, okay, so if that changes, then what? Like,
Then
what
what?
does life look like? What will you
Right.
get? What, like, going beyond that, even, I think, was mind changing for Sam and I, because it's like, what are you chasing? Like, what are you moving towards? Stop
Right.
talking about what you're moving away from. Like, what are the things you don't want? We don't want a marriage like my parents. We don't want to blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, what do you want? And what's going to be on the other side of that? Who do you have to become to have what you want?
Right. And how do you want it? Because you can't drive. You could, you're going to wear out the engine driving in reverse to get to where you want to go. And then there's really no joy in the reverse travel. Turn the car around and go toward what you want. And it's just like with, I think, Kori, the same thing with you is you came to me because you wanted CFT for Koa. And I was like, no, I'm going to teach you about his body. I'm going to teach you this system. I'm going to teach you what needs to happen. It's not release based, it's activation based, it's charge based, it's filling based, it's all these things. And then you were like, okay, I think I got it, and then you began to have experiences with this, and then watch the changes take place. And so I tell parents all the time, I'm like, you can tick your list clear, with everything that's wrong. And then what are you going to have? And a lot of times I can't get people to connection, vitality, these qualities of life that they actually are not even really focused on. They're just focused on getting rid of the things that they don't want. Well, that's not a strategy. Well, I mean, it is, but it's not going to get you what you want.
A lot of times, like, say in a marriage container, you're in such a defense state. You can't even, I can't imagine having a life lived like that, with vitality and with connection. I can't even access that part of the world.
Yeah.
It makes me think of, there's like this Instagram, TikTok video trend where it's like, am I going to take this or double it and give it to the next generation? And like, it really is like that. Like, if you have to be able to take that personal responsibility and deal with the things maybe they have been doubled and given to you. If we're not willing to like take our own responsibility, accountability for us, not us as a couple always. Initially, it's us as a human. Like you said, we can't control the other person. But if we don't take that responsibility for ourselves, like, we kind of, in a sense, are doubling it and giving it to the next generation, because they're just literally watching every little thing you do. And so not only is it huge for the current marriage relationship, but it's huge for your kids and their future marriage relationships and stuff like that. So it's so encompassing.
Yeah. Did you have anything else you want to add, Kelly? That was really good.
Yeah, actually, I'll take it all the way back to the beginning. Okay. Things with Steve and I, like, we're just not great. Like, over COVID stuff, like, we just were on the struggle bus. We had moved away from family. We finally kind of got out of doing ministry and stuff like that, which is super stressful on families. Had a horrible situation with that. So lumping coronavirus stuff on top of that and being like quarantine and we were just all home 24/7, it just like magnified everything that we didn't even realize was an issue for us. And, you know, just all of our stuff and our ick came up to the surface when we didn't have to like have that mask of being in ministry and being good Christian girl, good Christian boy. It all was able to kind of surface and come up. And we were, for the first time, not running ourselves ragged. And that's something too to recognize. If you're running your family ragged, doing all the things, sometimes you're not going to see what's fully there because you're staying so busy. It's a defense mechanism, basically. It's like a coping mechanism that you're trying to do, is like, just stay busy so nobody falls apart. Okay. But everyone's dying and they're exhausted 24/7. So we had kind of hit that point, and you know, we were like, we met Colin and Briana, kind of formed a relationship with them, and then kind of had heard about, you know, couples container. We were like, okay, like what's going on here? So I felt I actually was not even trying to do couples container. I was trying to fill out a form for something else with Michelle, but I think I accidentally filled out the mentorship form. And I was like, in my mind, not even thinking about it, just answering the questions like, okay. Well, we did our call with her and she was like, so basically, if you guys don't change things, like you're headed for divorce. And I was like, excuse you? I was so upset. I was like, wait a minute, what? And then when I had talked with you, you know, further and asked you some question about it, you're like, yeah, your Google form answers like told me a lot about y'all's dynamic. And I was like, I don't even know what I put in there. Like, I remember getting off the phone call and calling Briana. And that was such a funny telling thing, is I would not talk to Steve about how I felt. And I called Briana to deal with it. And I was just like crying. I was like, who does this lady think she is? I mean, I did the whole shtick. Okay. But then I thought about it. Okay. I took some time, calmed down, thought about it. And I was like, frick, she is right, dude. Like, me and Steve talked about it and he's like, yeah, she's, and Steve was like, we have to do this. And I was like, you sure? He's like, yeah, no, we're doing this. And I was like, okay. But I went into that call thinking, oh, I've been working on myself for like a couple of years now. And Steve, he's not quite there yet, but like, maybe he'll get there. It's not like I necessarily came in with like, let's fix this guy. It was like, I was taken aback at how much fixing I had to do. Like, I thought it was going to be mostly him, and it was not. It was a lot me. And honestly, as far as our container went, and we were living with my parents for like the majority of it because we were in transition, I had to work through so much stuff. And because it took so much out of me to be able to work on that, and then like my husband's working a full-time job, we're living with my family, I have kids, we homeschool, it's a whole thing. He hardly had time to work on himself because he was just trying to like help me to not fall apart fully, you know? And so his kind of transformation ended up coming after, which is why I am like a huge like champion for True North women, because I feel like that just gives people that space to be able to do the transformations for themselves and do it and keep it as a quiet seed. Like, do y'all remember how that first, what was it, like 2 weeks, Michelle's like, don't even talk, girls. And we were all like, what?
Me?
You were like, and you were like, talk slowly. Cause we were all like, you know, so it gives you time to do that in True North, where you're able to process that and then let the husband see and be like, what's going on? And since I've been able to witness, be in the True North women groups and kind of witness that and be there to help Michelle a little bit, it has been so cool to just watch people say, my husband has noticed this about me and noticed that about, and I'm just like, this is so great. Like, this is amazing. So, yeah, I really did think it was mostly him, and turns out it's
Well,
not like that.
he got nailed at the end though.
He got hard at the end. He definitely did not escape, but and it's been huge for him. Like he has had to like battle some demons just here. And I mean, it's been in the past few months, and well, I guess it was before that, but like the past couple months, we've been like in a very steady, stable place. And to the point where I'm like Michelle said, we burnt our marriage down to the ground and started over. Like, I know that sounds crazy because we have literally a 12-year-old, 9-year-old, 3-year-old, and a dog and some chickens. And like, sometimes you still have to burn it all the way down to the ground and rebuild. And it is wild. Like, I'm still kind of like, wait, do I even know you? Like, it's so in a good way though. Like, I thought you were going to respond this way and you didn't. And that's wild to me. So it's been huge. Like, and Steve would say the same thing. He's like, yeah, he's totally, both of us are totally changed. Our families totally changed. Our whole dynamic has changed.
Yeah, you guys are actually at a place where you can create and build something now. And, I'll just say too, I think, Kelly, one of the reasons I was able to clearly connect with you so much is because of the similar history and process that we have in fundamentalist Western Christianity, and the things that your parents were involved with, and the way you were educated, homeschooled, and all of those things. So I spoke that language fully, and I have a lot of experience with that. So, I could easily look back at that time in my life and go, oh, well, that was a mistake, or that was whatever, because I had all of this experience with that. And yet it serves me so well every day to have had those experiences, because now I can see it. I see the glitches. I see the developmental mismatches, and somebody's chronology and their biology and their development are totally like skewed. And it takes a lot of energy to run between the two when you're trying to actually live in the world and adult, right? And I could see that, and I'm like, okay, we're going to help you calibrate that. And so you're just running like one track between them and not running all over the place between your chronology, biology, development, and your emotional development as well. So saves a lot of energy, right?
Yeah. And I will say, it is also very interesting. We were the older couple in the group and have the oldest children in the group. And so it's been really interesting to do that with a little bit older of kids. Even to this day, like as they're hitting new developmental phases, things that we realize we struggled with at that age, we're able to see that in them that we had happen with us. And if we're intentional, and now with the new mindset and our expansion to be able to hold this, we're able to see that and be able to integrate it for our 12-year-old self, our 9-year-old self. And it's huge. It's beautiful. It's not easy to have kids and do this kind of stuff. But it is also super beautiful and can be helpful in certain ways. So I feel like there's always like pros and cons of that,
Yeah. Nice share. Thanks. Kori, did you want to share something?
I was just going to say that I think that the victimhood piece and all of it was just like that catalyst to be able to look at yourself and go, where have I sought to just like punish basically and like persecute either myself or my husband or my kids? Or, I mean, that's like when I even think of just the idea of like, I mean, not to like bring in a conversation about corporal punishment, but like a spanking is to me that image of punishing and having the quick getting rid of this tension that you could lean into, and it could instead be this window. And I think that image is like so powerful for people to understand how that plays into, like, you could, like, we since we started parenthood, we were like, yeah, like we wouldn't we wouldn't spank, we wouldn't do this. And yet there were so many ways that I was punishing myself, that I was punishing my husband. And I think for us, it all came to a peak during my daughter's birth, and the labor that I experienced, and to see it play out experientially, because I was having an experience of how I was like removing myself from the discomfort and the pain, and to even give birth to my child. What I integrated was that idea of moving towards and softening in that tension. And it was incredibly difficult for me because it was not something I was already embodying. And so that was kind of this wake up piece for me. And then that was like the main thing that Michale brought to my attention, is like, you, when tension comes, you can't hold it. And what would it be? Tolerate it? What would it look like for you to tolerate and soften under tension? And so like me, even just starting bowspring classes, like changed my life. I'm gonna hop in bowspring later today. Like changed my life to have an experience where I am softening within my own tension, and to see that playing out in my everyday life of, can I sit here and hold this? And my relationship with my business, my relationship with like I used to be, I mean, Michelle and Molly, and I'm sure Briana knows, but I used to just get so like for like any kind of resistance that would come my way, or like the online haters, blah, blah, blah. Like I would get, it's almost like I would attract it into my life just so I could just continue having this like trigger. Yeah. Yeah. So like, I think it's pretty amazing to see how my entire system like approaches that realm now, and like my capacity to be able to soften under the tension and release myself from the outcome is unreal. And that was what was laying the foundation for us to be able to step into this sustainable family dynamic with our children, with my marriage, because we stopped playing the victim role, and we were all doing it in my family. And I can still see how like my son is still calibrating that as well, because he had 3 years of programming of, you know, what he had an experience with in his body, which was a lot of like just victimhood. That was a lot of our family dynamic. And so being able to take ownership of that, and not in a way where you're like, it's a completely different energy to go, where is this my fault? Where is this my fault? Or like, oh, this is my fault, I'm to blame. Like, that's just a totally different energy than this like opening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a softening to like, what is my role in this? What is my role in this? It's a totally different question.
Yeah.
It comes from a place of wholeness and seeking wholeness.
Or not even saying, what's my role in this, as if it's prescribed to you. But what's my role in, what do I want my role in this to be? Who am I in this scenario, and who do I want to be in this scenario? And if you have a really strong idea of who you are, then you already know what your role in a scenario is. And then you step into it gladly with fun and energy, and like, okay, I'm going to be the turd in the punch bowl in this one, you know, let's do it, you know, or I'm going to be the, you know, whatever in this, I'm going to be the bridge builder, I'm going to be the bridge burner, I'm going to be have an experience, you know.
Totally. That's funny you say that, because I literally just had the epiphany the other day. You guys will appreciate this. One of my stories I would play out is like, why do so many people message me on Instagram, asking me questions, asking me this, talking about this, like, why do so many people, it would literally be like, I would attract it, and then I would get like triggered by it, and then repeat cycle. And literally like upon doing couples container, really learning who I am, what my like what is aligned for me, I literally just set the intention one day, like, I'm not someone that responds to people's questions. So people are going to stop asking me questions, and people have stopped asking me questions. I don't get messages anymore. I really don't even get messages anymore. my DMs on Instagram are just like empty. It's unreal. Like I was just like, this is who I am, and this is who I'm showing up as, and this is how people will respond to that. And anyways, that's just an interesting like epiphany that I had of just like, no, that actually is really powerful who you are. And if you're going to like step into that.
I also think you took that full circle and you changed the way that you're presenting things online too. It's not like information. So people aren't coming to you with information because you don't want that. If you want to be someone else, like that's so cool to see the full cycle. I feel like we talked about this at the beginning of our couples container, but the drama triangle, that has been coming up big. It's like the victim, persecutor, and
hero.
Yeah. The drama triangle.
Perpetrator, victim, hero. Yeah.
And when you can like recognize those, you don't have to play in the like in that triangle anymore. You're like,
no, literally, I was like, I'm not going to be anyone's hero or savior, and therefore people aren't coming to me for me to fit that role for them. And then we're not going into playing this dance where they suddenly become a victim to, myself. So 100%.
And that I feel like a lot of times in motherhood and in like marriage as a wife, you become the hero or the martyr and the whatever. And then it perpetuates that thing again. And then you find yourself as a victim and the whatever. So, and then you're spanking or you're doing whatever and you're persecuting. So it's like so cool to see it not only in just your container with your husband, it's everything.
Really quick, Kori, I think that one of the reasons that your community, I'll take it back to myself really quick. So if I am not nourishing myself, I'm gonna even start over. I think it starts with like self-love. And I think a lot of people in your community, Kori, start to recognize that piece with minerals, with nourishment, with food. And so they start to get to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, I have not been feeding myself. I have not been nourishing myself. I have not been getting the things that I need in order to stay here instead of here or here. And therefore, once that body starts to get online, it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm starting to see that I could have the capacity to change things in my family. Yeah. And it's like, that's why I think all of us are drawn to Michelle, but all of you, like Kelly, you have like the nourishing piece as well, like just in motherhood, and Molly, just like in general, like nervous system regulation, right? Like and then, like Michelle, like as we are like all went through this container and had that experience together, like the people, like all of us, I'll just say, or me, I'll speak for myself. When I am giving myself compassion and love and allowing myself to come out of that perfectionism, I have to get it right. Everything has to be good. I have to take this course and do this and add all these things in because something's wrong, something's off, right? And so as we start to down, like chill out the system, right? And we start to see things a little bit easier and better. I think that's why we're attracted so much to everything all of you women are offering. At least that's how I am, where I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, I see that there could be a light at the end of the tunnel because I'm starting to chill and I'm starting to notice that like, yeah, things could change, things could be different. And that is something for me, my personality, my wiring, that can get off very quickly, meaning I will forget to eat and I'm breastfeeding. I'll just be doing the things, right? And my loving husband will be like, did you didn't eat today?
You're not you when you haven't eaten.
Literally, give me a Snickers. But seriously though, like that, all of these, I think that there's a reason why like your community, Kori, resonates so much with these things is because they've tasted and seen, they've had the experience with nourishing their bodies and what that has done, right? Like for myself, it's huge. That's like amazing, right? Like Michelle would say, like getting your human online, right? And then from there, where do we go from here, right? And I think that's what a lot of women are, including myself, is like, okay, what is the next step? Like, like I'm here, I'm online, right? So anyways, all that to say, like, I think it's so beautiful as we continue in that self-love piece, that self-compassion piece, we're able to just kind of show up and have the experience, because it's okay if it's messy. It's okay if we have to apologize. It's okay if we're moving forward, right? So anyways, that's, for me, that's been like such a big thing, is like, yeah, like once that, yeah, just the, and it's gonna continue. Like, I'm still noticing, even though I've had many amazing experiences, it's this beautiful cycle where, you know, as Michelle would call it, like auger forward, like you're going to go around and have these deaths and rebirths and have to burn some things down. And it's never this like, oh, I've made it. They're like, here I am. Like, I've made it. It's like, and that's why communities and like things like this are so beautiful and important, is like, we're all witnesses in this experience, and we are able to like show up and be ourselves and have other people show up and be themselves. And I don't know, it's, as far as like it going back to like the husband piece, like when they witness that, the real thing, right? Not just like, I read something on Instagram and I'm going to try to do it, and I'm going to try to force everything.
Yeah.
It's real. It's real. Like it's real. So,
And the inspiration that they have to show up is completely different. I know all of us have partners that show up in incredible ways. I mean, it's incredible the ways that they show up. It's like most women's dream, the way our men show up and care for each other and care for each of us women. And the things that they do are just unbelievable. It's unimaginable. It's for many women, it would be unimaginable that a man would show up like that. Kori's like, yeah. And I think, Briana, what you're saying is at the crux of it, and Kori, I know you've been talking about sovereignty a lot lately. The the underbelly of that is when we get to a point that out of self-love, we no longer outsource to other people. Everything begins to shift. I see this with, families who are going down the airway, downward spiral in all of the diagnoses and all of the treatments and all of the things, is they're so ungrounded. They're so willing to outsource their knowing. And I'm like, pick something you want to have an experience with and go have it. You're not going to get it right or wrong. Trust me. Go have an experience with something that you think you resonate with, and stop letting someone else tell you what you have to do because fear, bad outcome, blah, blah, blah. Quit being manipulated like that. But then what happens is, if we don't know the ways that we're conditioned and limited, it's like one day somebody takes off the glasses and you're like, I'm in a house of mirrors. I had no idea that this was all like so much illusion around me. And you begin to take out the mirrors from the house of mirrors. And then you're like, oh, thank God, I'm just finally in my house and it's peaceful and calm. And I don't have to like, all the way around. Right. But then you begin to feel from the inside out, and there's love there. And then you're motivated from that space. It's a completely different outcome.
Well, to me, that brings up a really interesting point of anybody that's come from like a Christian background. I don't know about all of you guys, but how I kind of understood things growing up in Christianity and being in ministry. I always thought it was still like the women's job. Like the men were supposed to lead. Okay. We knew the men were supposed to lead, be the leaders of the home. And us women were supposed to be there to support them. And then I think it was even understood that women set the tone in the house. But for me, that I always understood that as adding more things to my plate of like fixing things for other people, making sure this is good, making sure this is taken care of, and this and this and this and this. And I'm over here like, I am so burnt out. And I can guarantee when I'm talking to the Holy Spirit that this is not it. But that's what's a lot of times put out there. I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but for me, that was my experience. And so this is just such a different way of approaching it. It still is, we as women set the tone in our homes, and our husbands do eventually rise up and hold that frame and really are there to support their families and be leaders in the family. Doesn't mean that I'm not a leader. I'm also a leader, but I had to really take responsibility for myself. And that did not look like what I thought it was going to look like. And it's a much more loving and tender, still very tough in a lot of ways, because you're dealing with things within yourself that are not easy to go through. But I think sometimes as women, it's a lot easier for us to like pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and do all the things so that we can look and feel good. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to like actually go in and deal with things from the root of it. So that was a really interesting observation that I had as far as like religion goes, and I now, just feel so differently and encourage people so differently, like that's just not how we were created to be. We're not created to add all the things and just work ourselves to the bone and hoping that the guys one day step into it. That's just not, if we can all agree on one thing, that is just not how it works. Maybe somebody in the world and it worked for them and that's just their personalities or something. But for most people, that's why we're all here, right? Like, this is why whoever's watching this, you're here probably too. So, we need,
it's not, and I don't particularly love the word, it doesn't work. I like more specific words in the frame of the word work. So what I always say, it's not sustainable.
That's true.
It's not sustainable. So to have a life of the qualities that we want, it has to be sustainable, right? And I know in my life, in my married life, I took a lot of that on in my married life, and it was not sustainable. And I kept saying, this isn't sustainable. This isn't sustainable. This isn't sustainable. And I'm like, okay, well, what is sustainable? Well, because I couldn't get like collaboration. I don't like the word compromise. I like collaboration. We couldn't collaborate on what sustainable was, then it just blew apart. So you have to be really, these are vulnerable, like, spaces of what you really want. I know most people are really shocked when they come to Hawaii, and I know they're in any of our homes, the lack of things that we have, the way that we live, the kind of dirty way we live, and we're always in and out and this and that, and I'm at the naked beach, or we're in waterfalls, or we're whatever, and but that is sustainable, and that gives joy, and that is what what I wanted and what I needed. And so when you seek that and you mind those things first, things really begin to change. Anybody yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to what Kelly said about just her experience in the church. And I think that even just having that word experience, and will you go have an experience, even just to uproot yourself, even if it's just temporarily out of the environment that you've always known, and if that's with religion, maybe that looks like, being in the South, conservative South, and like the one church you grew up in, like even just having an experience in another part of even the country, the world, and like experiencing that there isn't this linear one way of understanding the vastness of God. And I think that with what Kelly is saying, like that's been something that I've just like loved pondering on recently, is like And then adding to what you said, Michelle, with sustainability, like if we're not coming at it from within, literally, where are we going? Because if we're attaching ourselves to things to like hold on to, whether that's our stories or our wounding or the things that are like, it's almost like outsourcing. It's almost like plugging your battery charger into somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so just with the whole performance thing, it's just like, it's really relevant right now with Mother's Day coming up. Like Mother's Day historically in my upbringing in the South has been this day where everyone needs to show up so perfectly to their mothers in order for her to feel fulfilled enough and her cup filled enough and appreciated enough in order to then keep going. So it's like that plugging her battery chargers into other people. And that was a lot of my experience witnessing femininity, motherhood, and womanhood in the church that I grew up in. And that's just the reality of what my experience was there. And to have a different experience where I'm like, oh my gosh, there is a much more holistic way to like really integrate into life and show up in the most vibrant version of yourself and the most loving and compassionate and Christ-like version of yourself. That was mind-blowing to me. And like, yeah, just that idea of coming from within is detaching yourselves to all the things you're plugged into for your outsourcing. And yeah, anyways, Kelly, I like that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's funny because me and Briana have even spoken sometimes about like I really do love that you flip that word to sustainability, Michelle, because it really is. That's what it is. It's not if it works or not. It is sustainability, because me and Briana talk all the time, like using the word work. We've been like, well, yeah, well, that worked for us for a long time, like it worked for us. But it's not sustainable. And sometimes things will look like, oh, well, that's working for us right now. Like we're able to sustain this pace. But then it's like, as you have more kids or life changes or this, that, and the other, you start to find really quickly that sometimes that's just not as sustainable as you think. And like a lot of people now, not only are our bodies collapsing a lot of times when we are in that state of sustainability, of non-sustainability, but what I'm seeing even more in our generation, because we're still over here not thriving, sometimes we've been pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps, so we're like appearing fine when we're not really at our best. And this is where Kori's come into play so hugely. Molly and Michelle, you guys see it all the time, I'm sure. But our kids is where we're seeing, I mean, how many people do we know whose kids are just not thriving? Like they're just struggling. And it's just interesting to see the energetics and the biodynamics kind of play out in that. So
yeah, that's why, when I talk about family ecology, you have to go back to the environment and the parental units, right? Because that's as pretty much as source as you can get when you start talking about gains and drains, like what's draining the system. And uncharged kids cannot pull from uncharged parents, and they're little vampires. They're supposed to be. It's what they do, and then you teach them how to resource for themselves. And that's how it works. It's the perpetuation of the species, right? But we don't do that. We don't teach our children who they are, and we teach them what we want them to be and what we want them to do and how they need to show up to be accepted in the family and have rapport and be safe. But we don't teach them who they are, and we don't teach them the ways in which they're unique and how their specific body wants to be cared for and charged and all of that stuff. And it's imperative that we do that, or it's not sustainable. It's absolutely not. Closing comments. I know we've gone full circle, full time here, Molly.
I was just going to say, like as encouragement to everybody that's going to step into the Women's True North group, like it takes so much courage to like enter into this and have an experience and be willing to like go to another place, uproot your family if that's what it was, or even just having paradigms broken down or maybe conflicting, or like maybe like you're in the church and like this language doesn't fit something that you've known, you know? So it's like, it takes a lot of courage to step into this. And I just like want to say kudos to all you girls. And then also the women that just went through True North, like it takes a lot of courage, but you can do it. And you're going to be in community, you're going to be in a container that's going to hold you, and there's no judgment. It's for you. It's for you and for your transformation.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I go ahead. Briana, go. You go.
Real quick comment. It just doesn't have to look a certain way.
Mm-mm.
And like you showing up as you, like in the way that you need to at that moment, it's beautiful. Whether it's messy or ugly or whatever, you know, whatever we want to like label it and judge it with, it's that surrender and putting down so that you can step away and see what's happening, so that you can get out of the place of denial, or get out of the place of blame, or get out of the whatever is happening that isn't working, that isn't sustainable. Yeah, it's just so cool to like be a part of a container that's why it's a container, right? Like it's a place that you can be held and show up with your shit.
Yeah, in a non-judgmental way, for sure. Totally. Kori?
Something along the same lines as Briana, just like the ability, and piggybacking off of Molly, like being able to take a leap of faith like that and kind of suspending yourself into the state of surrender is a very vulnerable process. And to be in a container like that with women who show up in a non-judgmental way is huge, because I was just talking to Briana about this last night. If like we're in a state of abandonment, then what we've seen is like this attachment to, you know, systems and people and things, and it's really performance. And so the love that you have felt as an outsourcing is really just like how you are showing up as the good girl and as the performer. And like, it's a pseudo protection. It's a pseudo sense of love, and it's not sustainable. And so to bring yourself out of that, excuse me, to bring yourself out of that, at least what was my experience, was one of the most vulnerable things that I've ever done, is like go, oh wait, it was all just like this pseudo idea of love, acceptance, reputation. Like you're just performing, you're just a puppet. And to detach yourselves from those strings and go, who am I? Who am I? Like, that's one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself. And in detachment of what that performance has meant for you in the past. And so I just want to commend every single one of you, if you're on that path, or even if you haven't taken that step yet, but you're letting this, like, something's working inside you and you're just like feeling that. I believe there's so much purpose in you being here and just listening. So yeah, big kudos to you that are listening.
And welcome to femininity.
Yeah.
Okay? Like just literally taking that step forward, the step forward of surrender and of, okay, here I am. I'm going to show up as who I am. Like, I'm getting emotional.
Isn't it? It's just like totally, it's exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
And yeah, well, being a woman.
That's what I tell people in the True North Women, is like, I want you to be able to stand there bare and say, this is who I am. This is me. I've taken off enough layers to where I can at least see, you know, the beginnings of the outlines and the, you know, where it's like, oh, this is me. Yeah.
And to have other women witnessing and going, wow, like you're beautiful. Like you showing up as you. That's what we want, you know?
Yeah. And in such like a day and age of just imitation and social media and, oh, well, this person does this, so I'm gonna do that. And this, that, and the other. This is like a real opportunity for you too, like Kori said, cut the strings. You know, we have strings coming from all over the place, and being able to cut them, or cut the ones that aren't serving us, you know, and be like, okay, like Briana said, who am I? Like, and here I am. And having a once again, non-judgmental place to show up and be that is huge. And I also felt like I was supposed to say that, like, you guys can come with any sort of belief system. That is not part of this. So like, you can have your own belief system and work through your own thing, whatever that may be. And you can still come out on the other side and either keep that, tweak it, get rid of it completely. It's up. That's your journey. And that's been all of our journeys. We've been able to do that. And it's been beautiful. And I just think it's such an amazing, beautiful opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, you guys, thank you for your time,
Thank you.
openness. And I appreciate you all. And I'll link your contact for your products in the YouTube thing at the bottom, the comment section. So thank you.
Thank you.